I've noticed an interesting phenomenon surrounding Darren Aronofsky's new film Noah, specifically the reactions that different groups of people are having to it. It seems like, just from my totally unscientific observations over the last day or so, that the non-religious folks who have seen the movie tend to like it more than the religious folks or the Christians, specifically the more devout, maybe fundamentalist evangelical type Christians who have seen it. And I want to talk about why I think that is in a minute. But first, and for the most part in this video, I just want to talk about this movie because the controversy, such as it is, that's been stirred up by certain groups about this movie, about the story of Noah's Ark, and why it's a bad thing, or why it's a dangerous thing, or why it's Hollywood doing something that it shouldn't do. It's all surrounding a film. And most of the people, in fact, almost all of the people who are fomenting this outrage about the movie, at the time that they were trying to stir the pot, had not even seen the movie. The movie had not been released. Almost nobody who was complaining about it, Ken Ham, none of those guys had even seen the film. So now the film is out. Everybody can go see it. I've seen it. And I have to tell you, I thought it was a really, really, really good movie. This is a visually stunning movie. Darren Aronofsky, the director, has done such an amazing job with crafting this film with such a stunning visual sense. Obviously, it's a big epic movie. There are, grand vistas. There's a lot of outdoor shooting. There's a lot of really stunning landscapes, a lot of which has been digitally augmented, you can tell. But the special effects don't overwhelm things. The special effects aren't they don't give the impression that they're there for show. They're not there just so the audience can sit in the theater and go, oh wow, look at that, look at the great special effects. They're done for a purpose. They serve the story, and they're very artful. The visual sense of the film is very artful. There's a technique that Aronofsky uses, and it's both a visual, like a composition technique, and also an editing technique to show the passage of time. He does a really awesome time-lapse effect where the camera pushes forward, and at the same time as the camera pushes forward, he's rapidly cutting forward into different times, like just one jump cut after another, after another, after another. And it gives you the sense of being propelled like through time, through history. And it's a really, really effective and really exciting technique to show the passage of time. The performances are all terrific. It's a relatively small group of characters. I was, if anything, before I saw the film, I was worried about it just because of it being an epic movie. Because big epic movies like the old biblical epics in the 50s, or the more recent sort of disaster epics that have happened, that have been big blockbusters over the last few years. Just the sheer scale tends to make them a little emotionally remote, But that wasn't the case with Noah. This is a film with a relatively small cast of characters. It's basically just Noah and his family, and then one other character that functions as like a nemesis throughout the film. And that's really it. There's not like a cast of thousands. I mean, there's a lot of people in the movie in background roles, but the core cast itself is very small and very intimate. And the performances are all excellent. The actors have obviously been cast for their looks and for their voices, for their ability to state this very important, dramatic sounding dialogue in a way that sounds impressive, and they all do really well. Obviously, Russell Crowe as Noah does great. He sort of mastered that style of acting, that the sort of big, important figure, he says things as Noah. Like the style of dialogue is not naturalistic at all. It's very theatrical, very dramatic. Characters tend to intone things with like a great deal of gravitas, and it usually plays very well. It doesn't play like over the top and silly and corny. It lands exactly where Aronofsky wants it to land, and Russell Crowe does very well with that. Ray Winstone as Tubal Cain, who's sort of the leader of the opposition, the king who has a big problem with what Noah is doing and wants to take over the ark and wipe out Noah's family. He has the same sort of thing. He makes all of these really like grandiose pronouncements and he carries that very well. Ray Winstone is another one of those guys that just has one of those voices. He can say those sorts of things and pull it off, make it sound credible. He does a great job of that throughout this film. And then there are really only two primary female performances in the film. Those would be Jennifer Connelly as Noah's wife, and then Emma Watson as the sort of soon-to-be wife of one of Noah's sons. And both Emma Watson and Jennifer Connelly give fine performances. I can see how you might be able to look at this movie as anti-feminist, maybe, as chauvinistic, although that's not how I take it. You can look at it in a very superficial way and say, oh my God, there are literally two female characters in this movie that mean anything. And both of them are sort of at the mercy of the male characters for the entire time. And there's a really, really harshly misogynistic tone to the attitudes of some of the male characters, particularly Noah. And those of you who've seen the movie know what I mean. There's a decision that Noah has to make that hinges on what the gender of a child will be when it's born. And he makes a very Old Testament sounding decision as to what he's going to do based on what the gender of a child turns out to be. So it's easy to look at it as very misogynistic and very anti-woman, which would be true to the Old Testament, because rarely has there been a more misogynistic document in the history of humanity. But I don't take it that way. I look at it more as the female characters, even though they are existing in this very harshly misogynistic world where they are valued as nothing really more than potential wives and mothers, that the female characters are really the only ones who make sense from the beginning of the movie to the end. They're the ones that are sort of the sources of sanity. The female characters are the ones that look to the men and go, "What are you doing? What are you talking about? This is nuts. What are you doing?" And they're the ones that also challenge the authority of God before the men get around to doing it. There's a wonderful scene where Jennifer Connelly and Russell Crowe are having this argument over what he's going to do, over the flood, the wiping out of humanity, and now he's talking about doing other things that are just beyond their normal concept of what a normal, morally upright person should do. And she is the one who says, I don't care what you say, I don't care what you think God wants you to do, this is not right, you cannot do this. And the movie ends up proving her right. The movie ends up sort of coming out on her side and saying, yeah, she was right to challenge him like that. And the other major theme that people will probably be talking about is the environmental theme. There is definitely a very strong pro-environmental theme in the movie that sort of speaks in favor of conservation and in favor of treating the land and the animals as something that we are supposed to look after and take care of and help to prosper, rather than simply mine as resources. That message comes through very clearly multiple times in the movie. And look, if you think that the earth is here for us to plunder, you probably might have a problem with that. I think it's actually rather a gentle message when you get down to it. I mean, there's a scene very early in the film where Noah lays it out for one of his sons, and he says, look, things in nature are there because they belong there, and we only take what we need to take. We don't take anything more than that. And I personally don't see that as a radical message. I mean, it's certain. Look, and it's not how I live. It's certainly not how most of us in civilized society live. We all take more than we need. But the message itself, that philosophy that Noah is giving to his children, doesn't seem to me as a radical philosophy. It seems a very gentle, reasonable, completely understandable philosophy. But others may not see it that way. I was talking at the beginning of this review about why I think some of the more devoutly religious folks might have a problem with it. I think one of the things that they might be bothered the most by in this film is the fact that it portrays God as a distant, absent, confusing presence, and in his absence, in his withdrawal from humanity, the human characters are left to just sort of stumble around in the dark and fend for themselves. And things go really bad. Things end up becoming very broken, very wicked, very corrupted, and that's the assumed reason that God is destroying everything. Because see, even God's reasons for drowning everybody and starting over are sort of left open to interpretation. Noah has his own idea, but God himself is completely absent from the film, other than as this sort of mystical presence, this source of signs and wonders. So God never explains why he's going to drown everybody. It's just sort of communicated to Noah through these visions and these dreams that it's going to happen, and that Noah is the one who has been chosen to collect this remnant of animals and people to survive the flood. So it's just treated as a fact. There's very little reflection among Noah and his family of, well, why is God doing this? Why is this going to happen? What have we done to deserve it? I mean, mostly it's just, look, the storm's coming. We have to get ready. And that to me is a very damning portrayal of God. A lot of religious people, a lot of Christians want to have this very warm, positive, righteous view of God. They want God to be this fatherly figure who looks out for them and who loves them and who brings them into his arms and who redeems them. And that is not the God of this film. The God of this film is remote and seems very cruel and very judgmental. And the most just characters in the film are the ones who defy what they think God wants them to do. Noah ultimately, even though Noah completes his mission. He saves the animals. He and his family survive the flood. Spoiler alert. But he goes against, at one point, a very crucial point late in the film, and I'm not going to spoil it for you, but there's a decision that Noah has to make, that there's something that he has to choose to do or not do, and it comes very late in the film. And the decision he makes goes directly against what he thinks God wants him to do. And Noah is right. Noah defies God and does the right thing. He does the morally correct thing. And that conflict is going to upset a lot of deeply religious Christian folks, I think. The idea that it is not God's righteousness that redeems us. It's our righteousness. It's our decision to act morally and to care for each other and to treat each other with kindness and respect that redeems God by proving that his creation can be good. It's not anything that God does. It's not anything that God gives to us other than giving us the choice to behave one way or behave another. It's a very intriguing, very provocative message in the film it has a very primitive tribal version of God, a very primitive view of God in the film, where and it's really the only way that this story could have been done on such a large scale and in a way that you can take seriously. Because there is this inherent silliness to the Bible story. And the Bible story itself, in the King James Version, it's a couple of pages. It's not a lot of material. And to extrapolate a 2-hour plus film from that, obviously you have to add things, you have to interpret things, you have to stretch things out and go into more detail than there is in the original myth. But the way that Aronofsky does it is probably the only way you could do it. And have it come across as anything other than a big budget Sunday school lesson. And he accomplishes that. He achieves that very well, very admirably. It's a powerful film. It's a big, grand, impressive visual accomplishment. But it also is a very human story, a story about people struggling with their purpose in life, trying to figure out what they're supposed to do, trying to define themselves relative to other people, relative to their God, struggling with having to do things they might not want to do, to find purpose, to find utility, to look to the future and think of a reason to go on, a reason to have hope, a reason to keep living life. These are very fundamental issues that are at the heart of drama itself and that are at the heart of our human experience. And Noah gets at those. It finds those that are present in that original biblical text, and it brings them out, and it blows them up, and it makes, I think, a very, very, very good film. It's a challenging film. There's a lot of ambiguity. There's a lot of beautiful visual poetry to it, and it's a myth. There's not a moment that you watch this movie, and this may be the most potentially offensive thing about the film to its religious detractors, there's not a moment in this film that it's trying to tell you that this is a part of human history. This is a myth from the very beginning. It takes place in no recognizable location, in no recognizable past era of human existence. It's a story that has very deep roots in us, in our history, and in our culture, but it is not something that ever remotely actually happened, and it is never presented as such. That might be the most troubling thing about it, but it's one of the things that allows it to truly, truly succeed as a film, and it does. It's a really, really terrific movie.